Hey guys, in this video we'll be studying hoofed animals. These animals are extremely structured and they do have shorter fur, so they're great subjects to study those basic forms with. I'll skip the anatomy in this section since we covered it in a previous chapter, and let's get right into side views. We're going to break down the body into the head, neck, the shoulders and chest, and abdomen, hips, tail, and we're going to group the limbs together. Hoofed animals have a lot of angularity with softer forms underneath. We can see a lot of triangular shapes like in the head and the limbs, and rectangular shapes in the body. It can also be extremely helpful to compare similar animals to fine-tune specific proportions of the animal you're studying. For example, a zebra will have shorter legs and a much more rounded body than a horse, and a deer will have much more tapered legs and just delicate forms overall. Noticing these tiny details can help you find the things you want to push to capture the characteristics of whatever animal you're studying. In a three-quarter view, we can see just how rectangular these animals are. You can either build them out from the head or start with the body and build out features on either side. As you're building out the legs, make sure that the joints and feet are in line. For softer and rounder animals like pigs, you'll want to start with a fairly structured shape and then round it out when you're inking the animal. So as I'm inking this animal, I'm thinking about two things: form sensitivity and carving out planes. So I'm softening out the edges, but I am also indicating areas where I might put shadow shapes later so I can have a clear delineation between light and dark. And this is going to help me balance out the amount of negative space and shadow that ends up in my final sketch. Now, I'm going to be doing a couple more studies of this animal in a three-quarter view, starting with a general rough maquette with a Copic marker and going over it with ink. As you transition from going from a Copic marker to sketching with ink, I do encourage you to reevaluate the proportions one more time, even after you've already laid it out. Think about it as if you're giving yourself a second chance to reevaluate the proportions and the perspective before you make that final line with ink. And let's take a closer look at some heads. We can build the head in a very similar fashion to the skulls by using a kite that goes down the center of the face. So that's going to be the direction that your head is pointing, and crossing a cylinder where the eyes are going to be placed. And we're going to add a circle or a cube at the end of the nose. So following the perspective we already established with the kite, we can fill out the rest of the face and then introduce another cylinder for the horns, direction lines for the ears, and then clarify the eyes just a little bit. Now I'm just going to be inking the rest of the head and fine-tuning some features. With a lot of hoofed animals, the ears and nostrils and eyes, they're all going to line up down the side of the head in a straight line, so you can use that as a guide. The eyes are a diamond-like shape, and the pupils on a lot of hoofed animals are rectangular. So some animals actually have this thing called cyclovergence, where the eye will actually rotate to stay level with the horizon. And this happens so they can scope out predators on the horizon while they graze. And remember that herbivores have a large masseter, so really accentuate the mass in the cheeks. There is going to be a large variety of proportions and just completely different shaped heads in this large family of hoofed animals, but you'll find that you can usually utilize this same formula and just project different proportions onto it. Now I'll be going through a couple more heads just to show you how I can use this template in different proportions and different angles. Alright, and now I'm going to be doing a full study of a warthog. I'm going to be starting out with the side view, and I just decided to project the side view into motion since this is an animal that I have studied before. But if you're completely unfamiliar with the animal or subject matter, I do encourage you to do a static shot or where both the legs are straight. Any kind of movement is going to throw off the proportions ever so slightly. Moving on to the heads, I'm going to do a couple of head studies to really fine-tune the features and proportions of the head. I want to make sure that I can replicate these proportions over and over again. These close-up studies of heads are also a really great opportunity to study texture and introduce some values. Because in the context of a full animal, we're mainly going to be focusing on how to interconnect all these different parts and make sure that the entire body reads as a cohesive form. So there's going to be a lot of simplification that needs to happen. On this close-up shot, we can actually get a little bit more refined and start introducing some more detail and texture and really study all the different plane changes that are happening in the head. Now, let's do a sketch of a warthog in motion. Since we've broken down the side view, basic shapes, and gone into a detailed study of the head, all we're really adding is maintaining perspective while adding movement. If you find that you're struggling, try to isolate exactly what you're having trouble with. Is it the proportion? Then go back into that side view. If it's the form, then practice sketching the animal with just basic forms. Alright, for your assignment, take 1 to 2 hoofed animals and go through all the steps from side studies to introducing motion. Additionally, focus heavily on the basic forms. Like I said earlier, this is a really good opportunity to fine-tune freehanding perspective since these animals have such clear structures. And try going through different hoofed animals and doing a basic form study for each of them, and you'll really notice the variation in proportions. And in the next video, we'll be covering felines. Bye guys!